Welcome to the Young Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Malina, and I'm 15 years old. Today's guest is a bold leader and the president and CEO of the Western University Student Council. She's reshaping student life through advocacy, mentorship, and impactful initiatives, leaving a lasting legacy on the campus and beyond. So please welcome Emily. Emily, welcome to the Young Leaders Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. Yourself?
I'm really excited to see about what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to start off with the mystery question that was left by our previous guest. The question is, what is the most important lesson a failure has taught you about your leadership or just in life?
Yeah, absolutely. When I think about times that I've been unsuccessful, as for, what I'm doing right now, so currently I'm the president of the University Students Council. The first taste I got, I think, of student advocacy and more high level student leadership was when I was in my third year of university, and a girl named Nika asked me to be her campaign manager for the same position. And she had a really tough election. And I think the one thing about Western that's really unique to other universities is our voter turnout's very high. People are very engaged with our election, which is so wonderful. And I put a lot of work into that. I helped write her platform, did all of her comms and her engagement. And you put about 3 months of your time as a student. I worked a part-time job at the time as well. I was in all my classes and doing this. And unfortunately, after all of that, she ended up losing. And I think it's really devastating, because I think a loss like that or a failure like that, it hits you really personally, right? As a candidate, you put your life out there, you put your identity out there. And so I learned a lot from that experience. And I think it made me feel very invigorated to run myself at the USC. There hadn't been a woman who had won in 10 years. And I think watching somebody really go through the motions of that, I think there's definitely some electoral violence that is disproportionately affecting women that she had to go through. And I think from witnessing that and being a part of that really brought me to where I am now. So I think from a failure, I was able to learn from that experience and turn my own campaign into something a bit different from the lessons that I learned.
So you're like the first woman, I guess, in 10 years to be the president?
Yes.
Oh, wow, that's actually cool.
Yes, and we actually just elected another woman. So it's really nice to see that, these doors have begun to open, but I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her. And I hope that I'm able to open the doors for the next couple presidents that come our way. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And how does it actually feel like to be the president of the University Student Council? Like, what are some things that you do? What type of teams do you manage? How do you manage them? Like, you've got, I guess, your schoolwork as well. Some people I know have like their part-time jobs, and then you have this. How do you manage all of that together?
So we're really lucky at the University Students Council just because of the size of the organization that I actually graduated in April. So I'm finished my degree. You do this role a year after you graduate, so you're able to time balance. I think a lot of those things. I don't think I would be able to take on this role if I was in full-time school. It would just not be possible. I work around 60, 70 hours a week, so it's pretty busy. And I think knowing that and having the ability to have that work-life balance is so wonderful. And Western's able to provide that, or our student union is able to provide that. I think how I feel about it is very proud. I think I never really saw, as I said, I never really saw people in leadership roles like this on my 4 years on campus. And, it doesn't really change who I feel as a person. I think it's a lot of responsibility and a lot of exposure to the student body, and people know who you are. And that's a wonderful thing, because they should be able to come to you and express their concerns or share some feedback with us. And as for teams that I manage, I think I have my 5 executives. So the USC is split into different portfolios. So we have our advocacy. So I have my vice president, university affairs and external affairs, who work with our different stakeholders for both the government and university administration. Then we have our vice president, student services, vice president, orientation programming, and our vice president, student engagement. So with those different portfolios, it makes my job very well-rounded, and there's never really a day where everything is the same. One day we'll have a day where we're planning a concert for 3,000 students, and the next I might be in Toronto working with government officials. And I think it just really makes this role super diverse. And I've been able to meet so many cool people in leadership, especially so many wonderful women in leadership. And like I said before, I think the biggest piece is letting people know that they can see themselves in certain positions. Kathleen, who was just elected after me, is the second woman of color in 60 years to win this role, which makes 8 women. It's only been 8 women in 60 years who have become USC president, which is a very, very low stat. And to, one of the big things that we do at Western is we have our big orientation week, right? And it's customary that the president gives a speech. And I remember when my president gave their speech, it was online, it was on Zoom, unfortunately, because of COVID. But it invigorates that passion that you want to get involved, and to do that for a lot of young women who can see themselves in leadership. I think that's really big for me. So yeah.
It's actually quite cool that you actually have the opportunity, I guess, to be able to be a leader and then show that other women can do this. And having those women come up, I feel like it's very important. As a leader of handling all these teams, what has been one of the hardest decisions that you've made? Sometimes it's such a hard decision where you have the thought of like, what if I'm making the wrong decision or the right decision? How have you been able to handle those moments? And if you could give an example of one.
Yeah, like I mentioned, I think that there's such a diaspora of the different issues that you'll run into in this role. One thing that I think is really interesting to know about student unions across Canada, and in particular with different provinces, is that they're actually non for profits. So the USC is valued at around $36 million as a non for profit. It's one of London's largest non for profits, if not the largest. And so, yes, you are doing a huge piece in the advocacy at Western. But on top of that, you're also becoming the CEO of a very large corporation. And knowing that, at the end of the day, we do have around 60 full time staff with children and wives and husbands and everything in between. It's so important to know that we're also taking care of these people's families, right? So 100% our attention is the students. We work for the students, we're by the students. But I do think that there is that other side of the coin that people don't really realize, is that we do have a large stake in, when it comes to our wonderful employees that do work here. We also have hundreds of part time employees. So we'll have different things that come up all the time. Like yesterday, there's a really bad snowstorm in London. And so what ended up happening was, do we decide to shut down completely so people have childcare and all these kinds of things? And sometimes those little decisions you have to make every day end up being the ones that are the most stressful, because you have the least amount of time to make them. It's something that I've really discovered from more of a management side of the coin when it comes to the organization. And then the other side is, of course, the more student facing and public things, right? So, I can name a couple of examples. One time, during orientation week, there was a labor strike on campus, and unfortunately, our caretakers and different people on campus were striking, which made things, we have to really work around what does that mean for orientation week, right? And educating our students about why they're striking, and making sure that everything was done smoothly, and communicating in a really respectful way. People were moving into campus and there was a strike going on with picketers, and how do we do that respectfully, right? And there's, it's a new time. There's so many emotions going around. It's move-in week. That was a really big one. I think, we're looking with talent. So we try to book talent quite honestly all the time at the USC. We love to have concerts here. It's super important to our morale and who we are, and to bring our community together. And booking talent has gone up significantly in the last 4 to 5 years. It's very expensive. It's really hard sometimes to work with different agencies. We only have a venue that fits around 2,000 students. So how do we work around those parameters? And so also picking the talent that students really want. So this year we've had Alan Walker, we've had Ava Max, we've had Sway Lee come. And knowing that, it's not really an easy process to get there, and going through those negotiations can also be very difficult. I'm really lucky that I have a great vice president orientation and programming who helps run these things, as well as we have a COO who has his executive MBA from Ivy Business School as well. So to have that support, it's been really wonderful. But I would say sometimes it's those little decisions that you have to make in a short period of time that can make things a little bit more difficult compared to the more strategic plans that you can, have with some time in advance. So I think those are the more stressful pieces. And at the end of the day, in my role being president, any decision that the organization makes ultimately falls onto me. And so knowing that, there is a lot of pressure for sure. I'm 22 years old. I'm, just entering the job market myself, and getting that kind of responsibility very early on has been an experience that I'm very grateful for. But it also teaches you just so much, and being able to handle that pressure, and I think dealing with it in a way that's healthy is also super important. So yeah.
And how do you handle that pressure, I guess? Or even like leading teams, sometimes you might get criticized for some decisions, or some people might think other words. How are like the best ways to actually, I guess, respectfully overcome it or say no? Because I feel like when you lead, either it's teams or people, you don't want to hurt others' feelings, and you want to like respectfully say no in some way, but you also want to include it. Like, how do you do it in a way so it doesn't? ruin your relationship with your teams?
Yeah, I think setting expectations is like the most important part, right? Early on. One of the things at the USC, and I think just student councils alike, is, consultations are key. If you're making decisions without the voices of students behind you, without data, without surveys, without, meaningful conversations, I don't think you're making decisions correctly. And a huge part of my role is sitting down with our counselors, with our clubs, with our students, and making sure that when things do come up, we had, for example, a policy come about on, use of space on campus, right? Which felt to some students like it was taking away their freedom of speech when it came to public demonstration and things along those lines. I have my opinions about it, but my opinions don't really matter because I'm representing, for the most part, 37,000 undergraduate students, right? So I can take my experience and lead that way, but I need the data and I need the voice of students to come behind me. So I think if you do that and you cover your base to make sure that you make people feel heard, it can really take away from the scrutiny that you might get in this role. Because you know in your heart and you know publicly as well that you have done the most that you can to make students feel like they're included in a conversation, right? And I think that's when it's more admin facing as well. Not every student has access to the provost or the president of the university, right? And we have to utilize that in a way that they do feel like their voices are being directed to those decision makers at the school. We have a really strong relationship with our administration as well. So it's a balance of like, okay, we need to do the student advocacy. That's super important. But we also have to maintain the relationship that we have with our administration. And our collaboration makes things like orientation, like I mentioned before, possible. I think on my team individually, again, I have a very tight knit team. We're really, really close. I'm very grateful for that. And I think just being honest and setting expectations early on has always been something that has been great for us. And I think the comparing as well, like I think each VP I manage very differently. And I think if they compared each other, to amongst themselves, it would be very difficult. But I love how they all respect that. They're all different people. They all manage their teams in different ways because my VPs also have teams of about 5 to 10 people each. So they're also managing quite a bit. And I think having that understanding and just being honest is like, I guess, the best policy, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, that does make sense. And then what about when we're just gonna switch gears a little bit, but when you were in high school, did you know that this is like what you wanted to do? Like the path that you're on, did you know you wanted to like become president? Did you do student council when you were in high school?
I did student council in high school. I definitely didn't think that this would be the path that I would be taking. I worked for a really great company when I was in Windsor as a steel manufacturing company, and they had different conglomerates in both the US and Canada, and they were wonderful. I did that throughout my undergrad, and I thought, maybe perhaps I would go back to Windsor, where I'm from, and work. And I honestly still think about that in the back of my head. I love where I'm from. But I think this has also opened new doors for me too. Like I really found a passion for politics that I never really knew that I had until about 2 or 3 years ago. And I think university is really that time to help discover yourself. I think eventually I would like to go into more the consulting realm of things, but I would not have known that had I not taken this job, had I not gotten involved on my campus. In high school and, for the entirety of my life, my family has a restaurant back at home. And so my dad himself is a really, like he's a wonderful entrepreneur. He's not on top of being a wonderful dad, and seeing his work ethic. He's a restaurant, and I think that is such a key element to my childhood is being involved in the community. And so when I went to university, I think that momentum just had to keep up. My dad taught me just so much about how getting involved and giving back can really help out the community and ensure that they feel everyone feels best included. And I think you can apply those principles back to the USC, right? Like we really do what we can to make our community a better place, to listen to people, and to provide a service to everyone. And if we're not doing that, we're not setting to our mission. But I think when I was growing up, in particular, the best thing that equipped me was playing sports. I actually came to Western as a varsity athlete, and I always played softball growing up. I was gone almost every weekend in the summer. Is a huge part of my life, and being a part of a team is so key. When you look at stats of C-suite executives, I think about 90% of women who are in C-suite roles actually were on a collective sports team when they were growing up. And I think that just, sheds so much light on how important these things are to do when you're a very young child. My mom also put me in a ton of music. So I did play cello and piano and all these things. And I think I was very fortunate to have the ability to be involved as a child. And I think that momentum carried when I went to university because I just feel like I'm not a person that I could go to school and go home and be happy. I needed to do more. And did I know that would be the student body president of Western University? Absolutely not. I think that comes with mentorship and finding people in your life who can build that confidence within you. I had a really wonderful group of women who were older than me, who had done it all on campus. And the one gap that, no one had really gotten to despite running for the role as president. And to be here, it just means the absolute most to me. It's very full circle for them. It's full circle for me. And I think that being able to do a mix of things makes you relatable. And again, like I'm really, really grateful that I was able to kind of carry on those experiences when I was a little kid, and those values that you learn and bring them into my role now. So
Mhm. And so, what would be some, like, I guess, advice you would want to give to high schoolers who might be watching this? Because out of all the guests, I think you've been the closest to their age, so you'd probably understand it the best way. What do you think would be something you want to tell them relating to whether it's career or leadership or even politics or anything related to, I guess, getting ready for the future?
I would say keep an open mind and find experiences where you can learn the most. I think I really thought when I was in grade 11 and I did IB, I don't know if you might know what that is, like the International
Yeah.
Baccalaureate program. And I was there and I was like, I really am going to be a science girl. Like, I'm going to go down the route of, I really wanted to do psychiatry. That was like something that I really wanted to get into. I did so much volunteer experience around it. I used to work at a hospital. I did this trip called Encounters with Canada. I went to the Brain and Mind Institute in Ottawa. Like, I literally wanted to, that was my passion, that was my path. And I got to grade 12 and I kind of kept an open mind. I did more things around high school and volunteering in the community. And I really landed on human resources, which is so funny, and very different. But I do find that human resources has that behavioral aspect. It has that, social aspect in business that I think is so important, right? Culture is such an important piece. And so I do think, obviously there's a huge psychology piece in business as well. And so that's kind of like how I think my trajectory shifted a bit. And that's totally fine. And I think it's natural to be a little bit scared when you change your mind on things and your path changes, but it's so normal. And so I would say take every opportunity that you can handle. Obviously, you don't want to burn out, but I do think that I am so grateful for kind of dipping my toes in just about everything in high school, from volunteering to different part-time jobs to playing sports. I think that it's just what made me who I am as a person. And when I went to university, that feeling didn't change. And I just think that there's so much to do at university. You really grow up in university. I look back at, who I was when I was 18 to who I was when I was 14. And it's just, the same principles and values are there, but it's a different girl. And I think what really comes from that is confidence, right? And you will only find that confidence if you find the right people. And that's what university is all about. You find your lifelong friends, you find people who are up to amazing things. You're on a great trajectory yourself, getting involved and being a leader, for young peers your age, Melina. So that's so wonderful. And so doing that and, being a mentor for people, even though you're in high school, I'm sure there's people younger than you who look up to you too, right? And so it's all cyclical. Everything goes back to one another. And I think that is what drives inspiration. So yeah, I would say keep an open mind. Don't be scared when things change. It's usually for the better. And yeah.
Okay. And I guess we can end off this podcast with a mystery question that you would want to leave for the next guest.
Yeah, my mystery question will be, who was your biggest mentor and how did they get you to the place where you are now?
It's going to be an interesting one. I can't wait to see what our next guest says about this. Well, thank you so much, Emily. I really enjoyed this conversation. I think there was a lot of lessons in here that I personally learned and I feel like would be very beneficial for many of the young leaders who are watching this podcast. And I can't wait to see what the future
Me
holds.
too. I hope you get to 55. We met because you went up to Gary Vee and got some advice from him. So I'm waiting for episode 55. I'm happy to be a part of this journey. And whatever else you need, I'm here.
Oh, thank you so much, Emily. It's great. I'm very grateful to have such amazing people like you help support my journey to get to that, I guess, first milestone. And then from that, the only thing that you can actually do after that is just do the best you can.
Amazing, amazing. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.